This episode is brought to you by Prime Video. In the small town of Holland, Michigan, nothing is ever what it seems. Behind the tulip festivals and pretty houses lay dark secrets that threaten to tear a marriage apart. Nicole Kidman stars in this darkly twisted thriller about a wife and mother whose quest to uncover her husband's secrets may get her more than she bargained for. Holland, streaming on Prime Video March 27th.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new premium episode of Sitting Down with Dr. Dan. I'm here with our awesome audio engineer and terrific dad, Phil, to answer your listener questions. We appreciate you sending us your questions every month by DMing us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also emailing us. We read everyone. We love getting them, and we've got some great ones for today. What's up, Phil?
How's it going, Dr. Dan?
Going well. Going well.
All true, by the way. We love getting these questions and multiple channels for people to get these questions to us. And it's nice to see people are figuring out how to get these questions in. So we'd love to hear from everybody. So keep them coming. And with that said, why don't we dive into our first question, which is a question coming from email from Deborah. And Deborah asks, what are the signs of an eating disorder in a young tween or teen girl?
That is a really important question. We know that there are lots of pressures on teens and tweens, females in particular, but also males these days, through social media, how your body's supposed to look, what the current fashion is and the bodies that are shown, and people talking a lot about their body and their dieting. We also know in some risk factors also includes athletes and sports uniforms, body types that are aspired to, lots of exercising and working out. And in addition, we need to be aware of common traits that can lead to eating disordered thinking and behavior, which include perfectionistic thinking, high levels of anxiety, some obsessive compulsive tendencies, depression, and addictive behavior. A lot of times tweens do struggle with this fear of weight gain and distress around their body image because it is a time when their bodies are changing. Mm-hmm. And it's unsettling for many when these changes are happening in ways that you don't really understand and can't really control. So in terms of actual behaviors of things to look for, skipping meals and making excuses about not eating and then potentially eating in secret, an excessive focus on food or healthy eating. And as you'll hear, as I'm listing some of these, there is a fine line with all of this, and all of this behavior. And you really are trying to look at the overall pattern to see if there is a concern. Persistent worry or complaining about being fat or overweight, constantly checking your body, repeatedly eating large amounts of sweets or high-fat foods. Another thing to look for is regularly going to the bathroom after eating, if people are trying to get rid of the food. Mm-hmm. Eating more than is considered normal for a meal or a snack, and also expressing depression, shame, disgust, or guilt about your eating habits. So again, this isn't it often is not a black or white thing. Sometimes it will be in your face, and you will be really concerned about some of the behaviors or weight loss or weight gain that you're seeing. Definitely speak to a pediatrician or family practitioner if you're having these concerns, to get a read from he or she about whether this is something that you might want to take a look at, or have a professional talk to your child in a nurturing, educational, informative way, as opposed to a punitive way, which can sometimes happen and not be very helpful.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. And, as you know, Dr. Dan, I have two teenage daughters,
Mm-hmm.
one 14, one soon to be 13. And yeah, eating disorders are so very prevalent. And with social media
Mm-hmm.
being so omnipresent, and this sort of image conscious kind of culture that is in orbit around social media, we at home try to again look for some of those cues. And in our area in particular, it's pretty common, eating disorders. And when we notice certain behaviors, we try to see if there's early signs that it could take a turn somewhere, knowing that things
Mm-hmm.
are so volatile at this age as well, and just try to address it kind of in the moment, not in a way
Mm-hmm.
that draws a ton of focus, but in a way that sort of opens a dialogue.
Yeah.
And so if they are having, say, concerns about what they're eating and how it's going to reflect on their outward appearance, it starts that dialogue. It gets them talking about it. And then I think it kind of decreases that internalization. I think that is
Mm-hmm.
another contributor, because
Mm-hmm.
I've seen my daughter looking at the calories on the pack of something she's about to eat.
Oh, for
My
sure.
12-year-old daughter.
Right.
And to me, that's a sign right there that if she's already thinking about how many calories are in there, and she's an active kid,
Mm-hmm.
but she's, her body type is different, as is, everyone's body type is
Mm-hmm.
different. And so I take that as the opportunity to kind of pause her, after, I don't jump on her and say, "What are you doing? Why are you reading that?" And just say,
Yeah.
I noticed you were checking out how many calories are in that. And then we kind of kick off a conversation, and little things like that continue to kind of happen here or there, where I see her kind of start to question that. But it's just, again, keeping that open dialogue about it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
letting her therapist know that this is something, behavior that we've noticed, and just put on your radar, because it's good to have sort of that team awareness as well, because certain things might be expressed directly to you or not. Certain things might be directly expressed to the counselor or not. And so I think if everyone is aware
Mm-hmm.
of just what's happening in your child's life with respect to body image and with respect to eating and all of that, I think that also is going to be very helpful in making sure that it doesn't become just a teenage kind of concern developing into a more serious eating disorder.
And I really like your approach of addressing it as you see some of these behaviors in a way that is more conversational.
Yeah.
Try to keep the threat down and the intensity down, because these are not, these aren't easy conversations to have. Yeah. And it's easy for a child to feel shame around this stuff.
Just what I was about to say.
I like the idea of hitting it straight on and talking to kids about health, talking to them about that you're aware of the reality of social media and the pressures they're facing, and the body types that are shown, and what's not often shown is what goes into producing that body type, which can, not always, but can be very unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And I know in our family, my wife was always, with our two girls, always been really good about the focus on health, and talk about like what's healthy, what's a healthy body, what's a healthy diet, what's a healthy amount of exercise. And instead of taking the approach of like focusing on what's not healthy, is focusing on what's healthy, and to have that be the context. So I think there's a few ways to go about this. And what we're saying is, like this question, coming from Deborah is not to ignore it, not to be afraid to talk about it. And it's just really important to address.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. On to the next question. Question number 2 is from a direct message. If my daughter is afraid of dogs, should we consider getting a puppy?
I love that.
I do.
Potentially, yes. So that has been able to be a remedy for many families that I know when a child is very much a part of the process. And so I'm going to talk about this in a few ways. So first, big picture is looking at how do you help people who are afraid of dogs or any other fear. It's often through what's called exposure therapy or exposure work. It doesn't have to be in therapy. You can do it as parents. And what exposure is you decide what that feared stimulus is, to use the fancy technology, in this case, dog, and find ways to break down that fear so you could do one thing at a time to habituate or get used to that fear. So for example, a fear of dogs, you might start with looking at a book of dogs, looking at pictures on the internet of dogs, something that's really benign, and start to see some cute dogs and start to develop like, oh, these things aren't that bad. And, you know, I'm safe because I'm just looking at them on a page or screen.
And I will jump in just to say, this is a positive side of social media because there is no lack of cute pet videos and pictures on social media.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Oh my God, how many? Yeah, in all of our homes, there's people, we're scrolling and going, oh, look how cute these animals are, right? Yeah, good call. A positive use of social media, which we don't talk about it in that way all that much on our shows. So yes, scrolling, going to these cute sites. Then if you're thinking about having your child get more comfortable, and again, this is only so if you're not going to buy a dog or a puppy, we're going to get to the actual heart of this. Then going to parks where the dogs are far away and you're behind a fence or you're in the car, or going to pet stores where all the dogs are in their cages, and you slowly work your way up to a child going from being scared to being bored. Because the research has shown if you habituate and it's like, this is no big deal. You can't be afraid and bored of something at the same time.
Right.
And so you can work your way all the way up to going to friends' houses, relatives' houses where the dog is in the backyard and your child's inside. And then eventually your child is able to pet a dog that they feel comfortable with. Now, that is one way of training, whether you're going to get a puppy or not. That being said, if you have a child who is able to go on this process with you and look at the kind of puppies that they like, or go to the rescue organizations, and they have tons of cute dogs in those places, and start to get more used to the idea of having one of his or her own, or, you know, a family, that is exposure therapy, you know, to the hilt, basically.
Yes,
you're
absolutely.
Basically doing it with an actual object, which is loving and caring and going to lick her face and love her.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you said it perfectly. We're dog people in our household, but I can certainly speak to the process of involving your kids in finding, I won't say choosing, but finding that newest addition, that newest family member, really just creates for overall a fantastic bonding experience for the family, but also just a very special bonding experience for your child and this new addition. So I think if you want to get the puppy, you know, if that's also kind of a self motivation there, because who doesn't want to get a puppy? I think the advice that Dr. Dan laid out is perfect.
When we got our first family dog, they had a requirement at a rescue place. They had a requirement that every family member, no matter what age, had to be there for the whole process, which was very difficult in regular modern day life with 3 kids and work and all of that stuff. And the other thing, the stress of, because if you didn't get there right when you saw that cute dog on the internet, you know, there was 10 people in front of you who was going to get that puppy. So, or that dog. So when we went with our family of 5 when our kids were young. It turned out the few dogs we went for were gone by the time I got off work and we got there. However, we stumbled upon a new one, our beloved Quincy, who just happened to be there. I don't know if he just didn't make the internet or he just showed up, but all of our kids were there for that initial bonding experience, and he was our dog for 12 plus years or more. And it's just that you just made me think about that bonding experience right at the beginning was so powerful with all of our young kids at the time.
Yeah. And I think whether or not, our listener is considering bringing a dog into the family, I still think that it's just so worthwhile to be able to help your child work through that fear, because, there's dogs all over, and they might later in life have a good friend or a romantic partner that has a dog. And for those of us with dogs, we know that they're a big part of our life. And those people that we have in our life, we want them to be able to, accept that pet, enjoy that pet. And if they're going to be a romantic partner, then of course that becomes important as well, because it's, me and the dog.
Yes.
Great. Love talking about dogs. I could talk about dogs all day. Okay. Moving on. Question number 3. This is another one from email from R. Do you think cursing is really that bad for my kids to hear?
That's actually, it's such a poignant question, because there's such a debate about this. And there are kids that grow up with parents that never curse in front of them. And there are kids that grow up with parents that curse constantly. Yeah. And there's everything in between. So, I think I've changed over time. I think as I was as a young parent and a parent psychologist and coach in the early years, I think I was more rigid about that. It's just being completely inappropriate. Right. And then as I've gotten older and our kids have got older and other families I worked with and know, and I could see the nuances of, there's some parents that it's kind of part of their personality. They just cuss. They're real. And there are some that have, I guess it's about boundaries. It's like, what do you tell your kids about cussing, and are they allowed to do it? It's like, to me, it's what's the discussion about it? Like, is it something that they can do anytime they want? And, when that happens, kids often get in trouble when they're cussing at school or cussing and on sports fields when they're young. Or is it hey, this is an adult thing, and when you get older, there's lots of other things that you'll be able to do as well. Yeah. And this is how I talk. So I'm in the gray land. I think it really depends on the family. I want to say how the cussing is used. Is it used just as to enhance some of the language? Is it used in an angry or punitive or scary way? Mm-hmm. What do you say cussing means? How do you talk about that with your kids? So I think it's more about the nuances than a black and white yes or no.
I think so too. I agree 100%. When the kids were younger, we were way conservative about it. Mm-hmm. In the sense that, you don't want to hear a 6-year-old going out there and dropping F-bombs. Right. That's not exactly what you want to see happening. And they will emulate, what they hear at home. Right. But, as they got older, and we had dialogue with them about cursing, and our view on it is that it's something that can be used to enhance your language, right? Mm-hmm. But it's not something that you necessarily want every other word out of your mouth to be a curse, because let's face it, in society, people are going to look at a person that is cursing nonstop and probably think they're cursing so much because they don't have better words to choose from to express what they're feeling. Mm-hmm. And so still kind of this conservative mindset that it doesn't have to be a regular part of your vernacular, but a curse or two may come out, or you might use it to emphasize something you're saying, or to or you're watching a movie and you say, "Oh, S,"
Yep.
I think again, I think it's situational.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I don't, think cursing should be a substitute for, intelligent discourse. But three, it can be colorful when in the right context.
Mm-hmm.
And then four, know your audience, know the people that you're
Totally.
this cursing going to make someone else uncomfortable, which of course you don't want to do. So again, I'm in the gray area as well. I think there's appropriate times for it, and I think there's times where maybe leave the F-bombs at home.
Yeah, and it's such a fascinating topic because they're just words. As our kid, we'd have these dialogues with our kids too. Like the difference between truck and the F-bomb is one letter.
Yeah.
And pit or shit is one it's one letter. So it's like, or maybe those are two letters, but you know what I'm talking about, right? So it's like, it's helping our kids understand, I think, I like talking about this stuff with them. It's like, okay, yes, you're right. These are just words, but for whatever reason, they have a different meaning. And to some people, they are offensive. To others, they are not. And also, we have to acknowledge, like, I remember the first time maybe I cussed in middle school and dropped an F-bomb or did my middle finger. Like, there's something so empowering about that. I don't know why it's such a powerful thing. It's like a rite of passage that you, like, as a kid, that you get to drop one of these things. So I just think we have to be measured with, as you're saying, like measured with our response. And like everything we talk about on the show, these are conversations to have with your kids. And there doesn't have to be black or white. You don't have to be right. I find this engaging in these dialogues about language and about, well, what does it mean and why is it offensive and why should you and why shouldn't you, or where should you and where shouldn't you? These are the conversations that help kids grow, and they help you connect and actually gain your child's respect by having a dialogue, as opposed to just, you can't do that or that's not okay. It's like, let's talk about it.
Right. I think it gains that respect, and I think it also builds trust. If mom and dad are talking about this subject with me, then I always thought it was kind of controversial or whatnot, then I feel like I can perhaps talk about other things. And at the end of the day, when you send your kids off to school, they're going to hear pretty much every curse word under the sun.
Mm-hmm.
I know in elementary school, it started a little bit in the later grades, but I got frequent reports from my daughters coming home on the bus and talking about the boys were typically the ones that had the more colorful vocabulary, which is kind of accurate to my own memory of it as well. So I think there's no black or white. It's a great area to discuss with your kids, and it's up to your judgment as a parent too.
Yes, and I will say, where I think things have changed a little bit is a lot of the girls have very colorful language as well these days. I think another thing that's changed since we were growing up is how much more casual language has gotten in our culture. Whether from, we don't call people Mr. and Mrs. anymore. You call people by their first names. Like so it's more universally casual. And cussing, I think, falls into that.
I think you're right too.
Yeah.
I think that's, again, I think with a lot of these topics too, as it relates to our children's journey, right? And and as far as their journey through maturity, and just, it's a different experience. I look at my 12-year-old, and her level of maturity, surpasses, my soon-to-be 15-year-old's level of maturity when she was 12. It's almost like night and day. And I think that applies to the generation. And just, they do grow, they're growing, maturing maybe a little bit faster with some of this stuff, which is why it maybe is a bit more casual in a way that we might struggle to relate to, which is okay too. It's okay if you can't 100% relate, just try to have that empathy and know that it's happening.
Right. And actually, I'm going to take, because that's a really good point, I'm going to take that one step farther, which is just know that you cannot 100% relate, because one of the things that annoys, especially tweens and teens, is the notion that we actually have an understanding of what they're going through. And life is there's some parts of life in adolescence that are similar to some of the challenges of growth, but it's like on warp speed with way more world bad stuff going on and social media. And so a lot of the times I think we just have to acknowledge, and we don't want to acknowledge as parents because we don't like to be not in the know or not what's going on, but that's the reality, just to understand, for them to understand that you actually don't fully know what they're going through, and that you would like to learn as much as you can from them if they're comfortable telling you, like try to open that place that they can feel safe to share some.
Oh, totally. Because again, another just marvelous opportunity to connect and to learn.
Yes.
Awesome. Great question. All right. Question number 4, the final question of today's episode. We are moving across the country this summer. How do I help my middle school son make friends when school is not in session?
Important question. So moves can be tough for kids, depending on especially what age and where in schooling they make the transition. Generally speaking, actually, we ran into some community friends out watching the Warriors game the other night. Go Warriors. And it came up that he had moved between his sophomore and junior year and joined the football team. And he said that was the best thing ever because he was just welcomed in with this group of guys in the summer that were the bridge for him when the school year started. That's an ideal situation. Yeah. I'm just saying from conceptually. And so I'm going to back out of that, which is if you can find any organized situations like a summer camp, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, drama, theater, any local classes at the community center. You're just trying to get your child exposed to people so he or she can start to meet folks and get familiar with people in the community. So it's a slow, it's a buildup. And so I just feel it's usually going to be, unless you get lucky. Of course, if there are some neighbors and you live in a nice neighborhood where, when I say nice, I mean friendly neighborhood where people are out and talking, definitely helping your child meet some of the kids by meeting some of their parents. That is ideal as well. That's not always out there. So that's where I'd say look for these organized activities, groups, camps, sports, where they can meet other folks in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's a challenge. It's a challenging age, I think, for young people to meet new people.
It is.
But at the same time, I think maybe some of that's a little different right now too, coming out of the pandemic, kids just getting back into school and figuring out how to kind of re-socialize. This also could be, an ideal time to do this as far as helping them connect with other people as they are reconnecting, with the world. And so I think, just look for those opportunities of interest for your child. And I think that, summertime activities are great for that. You're not necessarily engaged sitting at a desk all day. You might be outside, outdoors, doing active activities, and just that's good for bonding.
And I think also just being mindful of your child's experience of leaving. So some kids don't want to leave. They have some great friends and they're really upset about leaving. And other kids have not had the greatest experience, and this is an opportunity to start from scratch and make some good friends and not have anything coming with them from their past. And there's a lot of kids who are right in between. So I think the dialogue and the narrative about how you talk about the move in a way that's very real for your middle schooler, as opposed to either, like being overly excited and optimistic when your child just isn't there. Because if your child is upset about the move, I think it's important to validate their experience of the loss, the sadness, the newness, the worry about what's going to be. I think we've got to meet them where they are while we're trying to help them get acclimated and transition.
That makes a lot of sense because let's say they are unhappy to leave, then there's going to be, for lack of a better word, kind of a grieving process. They're grieving the move out of the house, their friends, but on the plus side too, I think, and here's a different way of kind of thinking about it as far as maybe easing them into the new environment and getting out there, encouraging them. And this will work for some and it won't work for others. But we've talked about it on the show in terms of your children engaging in like online gaming in front of their console with their friends that are so distant. It helps to kind of bridge that gap. But at the same time, be careful that, that is not all that they want to do. Make sure that, that you have the flexibility to allow them to continue to connect with their friends. And then that might ease that transition a little bit because it won't be as much.
Totally.
This cut.
Totally. And again, this is this is a positive aspect of technology used for people to be able to connect across the country and keep those relationships, which are important and solid and trusting while making new ones.
That's well said. And that wraps up the questions today. I think a lot of really great submissions. Love, we know as both of us being parents, there is no lack of questions. No matter how many years you've been a parent, no matter, your vocation, our kids will always find a way to have us scratching our heads at the end of the day.
This is true. And these questions represent the reality of life we are all living as parents and all the multitudes of factors to think about, which is why we love the questions. Check out our previous episodes, which also have great questions. And we continue, we being Phil and I and Laura, our producer, and I, alternating to give you our perspectives, our 2 cents, and to validate your lived experience because we get it. We get it.
Yes, we do.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions. Follow us at Parent Footprint Podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. Visit us at our website, www.drdanpeters.com. As always, we appreciate your rating, your 5-star reviews, and subscribing. And finally, remember to ask yourself the question I ask myself each day: what footprint do you want to leave? This has been a Peters and Rossi production. Parent Footprint with Dr. Dan is produced by Laura Rossi. Our engineer is Phil Rossi. Theme music is Mountain Spring High, composed and performed by Gabriel Lewis. Artwork is by Garrett Ross. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Parent Footprint Podcast, and on Twitter at Dr. Dan Peters. For more information, go to exactlyrightmedia.com.